the folks what that graphic is showing us.
The graphic is one of the graphics you would see within our back office or in the web portal that shows the readings of the tank monitor and the fills. You can see each day the tank percentage that gets reported. The yellow section is where it hits 30, between 30 and 15. The red is 15 to 0. And so the daily reads come in. You can see other usage goes along. And up in the top left, and I think most do, they calculate the days to empty and daily average usage that helps prioritize and routing.
Great, thanks, Boyd. The last bullet point on this screen, different tank monitor vendors have different methods to transmit data. Each vendor might have one method or several methods or all methods to transmit that data from the field back to either a web portal provided by the vendor or back to the home office itself directly on a PC application running in the home office. Some of those technologies in use are cell phone, Wi-Fi, satellite, wireless data networks, and LoRa, which is low frequency radio technology. There's various technologies employed, and just kind of a comment on that, as you think about picking a tank monitor vendor, think about what different technologies they offer. For instance, I live and work in New Jersey. I live 15 minutes from the office. It's New Jersey. My cell phone provider is Verizon. You can't get a better combination in terms of coverage. Yet in that short 15-minute ride, I do actually have a dead spot along the way. So that particular location would not be a great choice for cell phone connectivity in that respect. So just keep that in mind. Well, tank monitor readings can be taken on pre-scheduled intervals. The different tank monitor vendors offer various scheduling opportunities. They can be read hourly, daily, weekly. But keep in mind, one of the features of a tank monitor in the field is it's battery operated. So if you're going to request a tank monitor reading every hour, you're going to shorten that battery life as opposed to if you just did once a day reading. We also have some dealers that I'm aware of that do just a once a week reading. They don't want it every day. Once a week is good enough. And usually those intervals are programmable on the part of the tank monitor vendor to pick whatever is appropriate for your application. So those readings then are made available with software provided by the tank monitor. I've seen web portal or PC access back in the home office. Some offer email, text messaging, phone apps, as well as direct integration into a back office computer system. Hence that systems is involved in this conversation. And Boyd, sorry, I got to say this, but there are numerous tank monitor vendors in the marketplace. WestRock is certainly one of them. On the phone also, I believe we have as a attendee, Raj from Tank Utility as well. He's on mute, so he can't say hello. But there are lots of tank monitor vendors here in the marketplace. Now, Boyd, there's also a graphic you've provided on the right-hand side. Tell us what that graphic shows.
It's just a quick visual. When you log in, on the splash screen, you can see of the tanks that you have monitored, the current inventory state. Most are good and green. Obviously, they're above 30%. We ship our equipment with a target or warning or low level at 30%, critical at 15. So what that's showing is there are 5 tank monitors out there that are between 30 and 15 and one that's below 15. And then some sort of issue with 14, bad sensor, bad gauge, not reporting, maybe batteries, an issue, but for whatever it is, I think you just click on any one of those buttons and it pulls up those specific tanks.
Thanks, Boyd. And while we've got you on a roll here, this picture was supplied from WestRock. Tell us what we're looking at here in this graphic.
Yeah, it's just an example of some of the equipment that's available. On the right side, it's basically monitoring equipment, our residential monitor, industrial monitor, and a base unit that can monitor up to 8 different devices in the home, including their tank or refined product tanks. And then obviously the web portal and our app. You can see the exact same information on the app that you can get the portal. So it allows for easier install and easier access to the information. So that's all that slide represents.
Yeah, and it looks cool. So thanks very much for sharing that. Appreciate it. All right, why do you want to deploy a tank monitor in the field? What are some reasons? Well, in my own mind here in dealing with my dealers, I've broken it down into really two major categories as to why you would do this. One reason is because I want to avoid a run out. And why is the customer going to run out? Well, one of the major reasons is that their consumption is sporadic or unpredictable. Maybe it's a vacation home at the beach or a vacation home in a ski resort area. They're not there all the time. The usage is very unpredictable. And they never call you up to say, hey, I'm going to use the beach house this weekend. Make sure the pool heater is working. Other categories: pool heaters, fireplace logs, inserts, pellet stoves, heat pumps, backup generators. I really like the agricultural side of this as well. I was talking to one of the dealers who said they do a lot of chicken houses. And when the baby chicks first arrive, they all come together, they fill up a whole chicken house. And immediately upon arrival, they've got to put in some generous heat. So boom, all of a sudden, the propane heaters are firing up because the chickens have arrived, the little chicks have arrived. Also, in the orchards, the wind machines starting to get cold. We're worried about frost. They fire up the wind machines, and that can be very unpredictable as well. I think that's cool. Construction sites, restaurants, hotels, they don't know when the big party's coming. And oil fields. I heard this from one of our dealers in Canada. They do a lot of the pumping stations out in the oil fields. They never know on what days those pump jacks are going to fire up. And so the propane needs are not predictable in that respect. So one reason is to prevent a run out. Another set of reasons is the efficiency side. And I think here's where your big ROI is for a tank monitor. And, I am asked frequently, Roger, is there a ROI? Should I do tank monitors? And I think from my seat, I'm not selling these things. There's, I'm not on commission for how many tank monitors get sold. But I clearly believe that there's an ROI, and I clearly believe that improving your delivery efficiency is a really good thing, and tank monitors can be a piece of that puzzle. So improving your gallons per delivery for better efficiency is one bullet statement, but it's got a lot behind it, of course. Now, I've heard an average cost per delivery out in the real world is anywhere between $50 and $75 per delivery. I have no idea if that's a valid number. Your results may vary, but there's a cost, obviously, every time you're going to send a driver out on the road to make that delivery. So if you can minimize the number of deliveries needed, it's a more efficient operation. Certainly going down to like the third bullet point, increased delivery, customer and company profitability. That all ties together, along with reducing capital expenses. Ties together. Less trucks on the road, less fleet. Makes sense. Going back to my bullet point number 2, a reason to deploy a tank monitor in the field is helping to protect those high priority and high profit accounts from potential runouts. Now, it could really be on the previous slide, but I put it here as an efficiency thing, just because I, a little opportunity to talk about it more. So what's a high profile account? Well, those that are strategic to the dealership. What's a high priority account for me? Well, if I were a dispatcher, I'd certainly consider my mother-in-law's house a high priority and make sure I've got a tank monitor on her, because I don't want to be sitting around Thanksgiving dinner hearing that story about letting her run out. So I think there's lots of opportunities to identify and prioritize who you want to protect with that tank monitor in the field. Lots of strategy can come into play there. Moving down further, one of the things I like to think about is everybody's got their delivery area. And everybody's got that 1 or 2 or 3 accounts that are way out there on the fringe. And honestly, it's pretty inconvenient to get there on any kind of regular basis. Well, if I put a tank monitor on there, then I'm going to know if it's worth making that drive or not. Without the tank monitor, there's always some guesswork in play. So I like thinking of those faraway locations, which, the few one-offs. It's expensive to pull a truck off route if he runs out, and you certainly don't want to waste the time to make a delivery if he doesn't need it. My next bullet point is, it's a technology upgrade for your company. People like technology now. It's a big thing. Everybody's using it. Everybody's thinking about it. Here's a personal story. My son graduated from college in the spring. He's got a job. He went ahead and opened a bank account. He went ahead and opened up a stock brokerage account. How did he decide who to do business with? Well, he wanted to check out their websites and make sure they had all the features he was looking for. And he wanted to check out their mobile apps to see what functionality they offered via the mobile phone apps. And that's how he made his decision. It wasn't based upon a brick and mortar or where the ATMs are located. That didn't come into play for his decision. It's technology driven. And I think the last point here is improving the service quality of how you deal with your customers. I think as a customer, they're going to feel more secure if they know, hey, I got some technology in place here. I'm not going to run out. I've heard stories, oh, people run out. Well, hey, I don't want to have to think about that as a consumer. I know I'm covered because, hey, there's a tank monitor right there on the screen for me. Hold on one second. Yeah, I just got a, sorry guys, there's some extra pop-ups on my screen. My apologies. So how can that tank monitor reading be used in the back office? Well, let's think of it this way. The tank monitor reading can really be equated to a driver going on site and manually sticking the tank or reading the gauge on a propane tank. So for instance, I'm not sure if I need to deliver this guy today. I send a driver out. He checks it out. The tank is full. He calls back in the office. Tank's full. You don't need to deliver. Put this guy out for another month or two. You know, that's important information. You can think of the tank monitor reading similar in concept to taking that stick reading or reading the gauge. Now, I'm going to come back to that topic a little bit later on, but let me just diverge for a second. In talking with our dealers, I've seen two different thought processes in terms of their deployment for a tank monitor. One very simplistic, where the customer says, our dealer says, I want the tank monitor to rule. When a tank hits 30%, 25%, pick some threshold, tell me, give me an alert, I'll go pull a ticket, end of story. I don't want to think. I don't want to have to do any more updates. I just want to react to what the tank monitor is telling me. That's one kind of deployment. The second kind, and I think where extra value is really added, is to take that tank monitor reading, go to the back office system, actually update the forecasting based upon that tank monitor reading, and forecast out the next delivery. I think you get a much better use of the tank monitor in that environment. So, you know, if you're just going to deploy a small handful of tank monitors to get started, then certainly getting that tank monitor reading daily and deciding who you want to go create a manual delivery order on it is a fine implementation. But I think you want to go one step further, and that is take that tank monitor reading and actually update your back office system, calculate a new degree day next or delivery date based upon that new reading. A lot of back office systems, certainly Ad Systems does, offers programs, reports that tell you how many future gallons am I going to need to deliver in the next week, 2 weeks, next month. Well, if the information is updated in the back office system, I have a better opportunity to use those tools as well. And then my last bullet point, ideally, not only do you take that tank monitor reading and do something with it, but you actually let your back office system automatically integrate to the tank monitor reading and have, if you will, instant updates to your system, whether you're creating a phone order to make a delivery on demand because you need it, or just simply recalculating that next delivery. To go old school for a minute, and the old school being, let's talk about if you don't have a tank monitor. Well, everybody sets up their delivery systems to calculate a full delivery based upon the ideal delivery. And the Ad Systems vernacular, the ideal or target delivery is defined as being the tank usable minus the tank reserve. And it's, you know, full delivery doesn't matter. I want to go make my ideal delivery. I'm happy with what I'm doing. So example, just on a 275 fuel oil tank, if my usable is 255 and my reserve is 75, there's my ideal delivery of 180 gallons. And you know what? It's not really relevant if those 180 gallons are at the top of the tank, the bottom of the tank, the middle of the tank. In other words, it doesn't matter if I have 50 gallons in it to hit my 180, or I got 95 gallons in it based upon how I've set up my ideal delivery for that particular customer. So if I'm hitting my ideal, I'm good to go. That's all stuff that comes into play when you don't have a tank monitor in place. But now let's go with, all right, I'm going to deploy a tank monitor. My command is review that tank setup in the back office system. Make sure you have a proper ideal or target delivery set up on that guy. Check the usables, check the reserve values you might have, check your target, and see that they're appropriate for that particular tank. Propane is the usable and reserve values match what's a typical company scenario for you, like might be 80% usable, 20% reserve. But check those values, make sure your setup is correct. In the fuel oil world, a little bit trickier. Based upon the tank and where it's located and where the oil line sucks the oil out of the tank now becomes more important if you're going to take the time to fine tune that usable value. In other words, on a 275, does the oil line come off the bottom of the tank? Hey, I can pull more gallons out of it. Or is the oil line coming down from the top of the tank and a few inches off the bottom so I can pull less usable gallons out of that tank? If you spend the time to understand how that particular customer is set up and fine tune the back office system for that usable value, you'll get better value out of your tank monitor reading. Let's talk about reserve for a minute. The reserve gallonage factor allows you to pad in a little bit of a safety factor to calculate the next delivery. You never want to calculate that next delivery on the full usable gallons. You won't always make it in time, even with a tank monitor. The larger the reserve, the sooner the ticket will be pulled. So the larger the reserve, the smaller your ideal or target delivery will be. And in some respects, that's good. In some respects, that's bad. So in setting up a tank monitor, I want to pay attention to how I've set up my usable and reserve for this particular account in this particular location to make sure I'm going to get a really good delivery every time I go, because my tank monitor reading, when it comes in to the back office system, still uses all of these factors in play to calculate the next delivery. And I like a larger reserve to prevent runouts if I have a house that's in a very unpredictable weather area. In other words, it might be a house up on a hill with a big wind, kind of an unusual place. So I might want to build in a bigger reserve for that customer. If a customer has a very high burning rate, a very low K factor, there's a good example to put a bigger reserve on that tank so you don't run out. And thirdly, if the customer is located in that remote area, I talked about it, I don't necessarily have to hit a super high target delivery on that remote customer. I certainly want to make sure he doesn't run out. I'm only going to go there every week or two or three, so I want to make sure I'm getting a decent delivery, but I have some padding built in with that reserve to give me some flexibility on when I go to that particular geographic area. So, review those consumption factors on each tank. They all come into play in terms of the math that's used when the new tank monitor reading comes in. So that includes, of course, K factor, any non-heat consumption factors that are in use by the back office system. And because every time that new tank monitor reading comes in, it uses all of those factors, the size, the usable, the reserve, the K factor, non-heat values to calculate that next delivery. So it's important to not only set it up initially, but to continue that review process as well. Next concept. When is a full tank really a full tank? And the answer practically is rarely, never. Take a fuel oil example. Driver's filling the tank, the whistle stops. Well, the whistle stops because the air, or most of the air, has been pushed out of the tank, and so therefore the whistle stops. But the whistle doesn't stop when the tank is completely full. That air flow stops when there's still a little bit of airspace left at the top of the tank. And certainly in the fuel oil world, there's a difference between if a tank is standing up vertical or laying down on its side horizontal. They can have differing amounts of airspace as well. You got to understand your configuration for that particular customer when you put that tank monitor on it, that there's going to be that airspace. So for instance, the day after a full delivery is made, the tank monitor reading comes in. It's not going to say 275 gallons are in the tank. it might say there's 270, 265 gallons, whatever, left in the tank. That's okay. That's not a problem. That's the natural reality of you never really fill a tank up completely full. It's just not practical to do so. And your tank monitor reading, which is like a partial fill every day, if you will, think of it from a mathematics standpoint, is okay that it comes in less than a full tank. That's an okay thing. No panic. Propane, of course, a little bit easier in considering what's full can be. Many monitors have alerts that can be configured to your specifications for draw rate, decompression, fill, load, critical, etc. So lots of choices from a tank monitor and how you set it up for that particular application. Let's talk about timing. I said earlier that tank monitor readings come in, hourly, daily, weekly, various time intervals. Daily, being from a back office standpoint, what's important to me, and timing of when that tank monitor reading comes in, when it's taken and when it comes into the back office system becomes an important consideration. So for instance, if my dispatcher is going to pull his tickets at 11 o'clock in the morning for tomorrow, I would like to have a tank monitor reading in from earlier that morning so he gets the best of information at that moment in time when he's about to pull tickets. In some cases, do I want a tank reading from 6 o'clock that morning or from 11 o'clock last night? Which reading is my preferred time of day to take that reading and have it feed into the back office system? Some consideration just needs to be given to that process so it matches the timing of the rest of your business processes throughout the day. Last bullet point on this screen, many monitors come with default low rates, 30% as an example, critical at 15. That kind of plays into Boyd's Westrock graphic earlier that said, how many people are safe, critical, etc. Those values typically can be adjusted per customer, and various alerts and thresholds are established as well and play into how your tank monitor readings are going to be used. Let's talk about pulling tickets. I think it's a pretty common practice for a lot of dispatchers to pull tickets ahead. I got it. I've been an ad systems employee for 35 years, but I came from one of our customers, an oil dealer in Newark, New Jersey, and I was the dispatcher. So I certainly got the idea of pulling tickets ahead from a safety standpoint and a planning tool. Makes sense to me when I don't have a tank monitor in place, but of course you put a tank monitor on customers. I already have reserve, I already have that set up, I already have my thresholds, my alerts established. I don't really need to pull those tank monitor tanks ahead. So one strategy in play is from a back office standpoint, my non-tank monitor customers might be in one group, but my actual guys with tank monitors might be in a different group. So when I'm pulling tickets, I can segregate those two out. And I'm still going to pull my non-tank monitor guys ahead, but my tank monitor customers, I'm going to run them a little tighter. I know what I'm doing. I've got my tank monitor to back me up. I'm good. So I don't need to pull those tickets physically ahead of time. And it's important to know as well that the tank monitor company, the vendor you've chosen, do they have a built-in safety factor? In other words, do they actually report 100% of what the actual reading really was? Or do they, add a 2% fudge factor to say, although the tank reading was 100 gallons, I'm going to report to the back office 98 gallons. There's some flexibility. Some of that is configurable on the part of the tank monitor vendor. Just be aware that it's a possibility to have that added reserve built into each reading, if that makes sense to you. You at least want to understand from a mathematics standpoint, does your tank monitor vendor include that or not? So keep that in mind. All right, moving on. So Roger, you got me all excited. I'm pumped up. I want to go buy, thousands of tank monitors right now today. How do I start this process? Well, one thing you want to look at is, do I actually have already in place for a particular customer, let's say, a good tank size? In other words, if I have to hit this customer every 3 days because he's going to run out if I don't, Well, the tank monitor on that tank may not really be the solution to solve that potential runout problem. Maybe a larger tank size comes into play. Boyd, you have a little bit more on that you want to talk about?
Yes. Well, the tank size and annual usage, the point there, I think, is, the number of trips to the tank annually and the average drop size on the tank. I ran into an example in upstate New York where we had a customer who was using 1,200 gallons a year and had two 420s manifolded. Based on 6,800 degree days in the peak season, they were, when they filled the tank at 80%, they were 6 days to critical and 8 days to empty. I mean, if you got a bunch of those, you're going to have a hard time keeping up even with tank monitors. So, taking as a general rule of thumb, most companies will use the annual usage would not exceed 2.5 times the water capacity of the tank. And so by starting with the right tank size, you can save yourself some trips and optimize your deliveries as well.
And I think that's a good, valid point, Boyd. Thanks for including that. So keep that in mind. But, now you want to select your tank monitor vendor. You got to find the guy that matches your needs. You got to worry about connectivity issues and how they connect. You want to worry about the support that tank monitor company is going to provide to you. You want to understand what features they offer in terms of website and mobile phone applications and alerts and thresholds that are available to you. There's a whole lot of factors that can come into play when picking that proper tank monitor vendor. So there's a lot of them out there. A lot of them have great stuff. Just keep asking lots of questions and make sure that whoever you select matches the particular applications you're interested in. So keep that in mind. Now, when you're going to start this process of deploying tank monitors, one of the tasks is to identify who should get a tank monitor. And Boyd, I'll let you jump in a minute, but just from my perspective, I've heard a couple of different things. Well, number one, a lot of back office systems have great tools already in place to give you reports on, well, who's been running out? Who might be a target based upon the fact that they've run out more than once in the last year or two. And some back office computer systems offer you flags on the accounts to say this is a priority account. So those become ones that you've already identified as an important high priority account. They're a good candidate for a tank monitor as well. I've heard a different tank monitor company giving a presentation. And one of their thought processes was this, in terms of like saving trucks on the road and driver efficiency. Take a zone where you have lots of customers. You already have a truck, maybe a truck and a half, maybe 2 trucks a day or whatever in that particular zone. Their philosophy, because they're selling tank monitors, was flood that zone with tank monitors. Put a tank monitor on everybody in that zone. And therefore, you're going to know when you need to go and when you don't need to go. And maybe you don't really need a truck and a half or 2 trucks in that dense zone. Maybe you can get away with 1 truck, just better efficiency, and the tank monitor helps lead you down that path. I've also heard another dealer tell me that on every new customer they sign up, the first thing they do as part of that process is put a tank monitor in place, because new customer, it's a little inconsistent to figure out what their consumption is going to be. So put a tank monitor out there. Maybe they leave it out there. Maybe they only leave it out there for a few months till the consumption factors are established. But the rule of thumb is every new customer gets a tank monitor. I kind of like that idea. Made sense to me. Boyd, also, the tank monitor vendors, you have various reports and assistance you can give in determining who should get a tank monitor. Why don't you describe what WestRock offers?
Yeah, that's right. And I think most telemetry companies do. And I think your points were valid. And all those best practices you hear people talk about that we've covered in previous slides, of generators and pools and unpredictable and high value. If you do a deployment analysis, or if you do an analysis of your delivery history for some period of time, we like to use 24 months, and you factor in what you think your average delivery cost is, and your target dispatch and what you fill the tanks to, we can lay out from you a report that shows you your least efficient to most efficient accounts. And trust me, all those best practices that people talk about, dispenser accounts and all those ones that you're worried about being more efficient at are going to show up there. And then you basically rank them from least efficient to most efficient, and you just kind of go down based on what your ROI or time period for payback thresholds are in terms of making the investment. But I like the example Roger just used, where I take and I say, well, I've got that third bobtail or that fourth truck in my market that's doing, let's say, 800 to 1,000 stops a year, but all my frontline trucks are doing 35 to 4,500 stops a year. Why don't I go find 110 or 120% of the stops that fourth truck's doing and get rid of it? And so that maybe between my ROI and payback thresholds, then I can add in my, how do I get rid of this fourth truck or third truck? Because it's your highest cost per mile to operate. It's your least efficient driver. It's probably your oldest truck, and it's going to be the first one you're going to spend $135,000 to replace. I like it because it ties in a line of sight between the investment made into telemetry and all those other ancillary benefits that Roger's outlined here today, and your ability to realize the actual return on the investment that you're wanting to achieve. Because now I don't have the driver in the truck, I don't have that truck on the road, so I know I'm saving it, as opposed to just throwing a few monitors here and a few monitors there and looking back at the end of the year and say, yes, I got all these intangible benefits, or tangible, if you will, from a service quality and a customer satisfaction, et cetera, but did it really impact my operating expense? Did it really impact my overall profitability? Did it really impact my ability to reduce and manage future capital expense investment? So you can kind of tie all that together. And then the last point I would make is don't forget to pay some attention to the ones on that report that are the most efficient. Those are the ones that have had out-of-gas situations or near out-of-gas situations. And from my perspective, they're just as important to spend some time taking a little analysis on when you're evaluating your overall deployment strategy.
Thanks, Boyd. Right, my last slide is, well, okay, so I'm going to buy these tank monitors. You talked me into it. It's great. I'm going to love it. Wonderful. What's next here in the back office? What am I doing now that I'm ready to deploy? Well, make sure you review those internal procedures for how you pull tickets, how you do your tank setups. Continue to update your consumption factors on an ongoing basis. And one of my favorite things to do is decide, well, how am I going to benchmark the success of this project? Where am I today, and where do I want to be once I deploy these tank monitors? Am I going to deploy enough to make a difference that's measurable? I hope so. But how do I measure that? Well, you can count number of runouts. That's an easy one. Lots of back office systems allow you to analyze average deliveries, average drops per delivery, and see how that average changes over time. It's not going to be an instantaneous change, but over time, are you improving that average delivery? That plays into the efficiency side. Certainly, you can measure driver overtime. That's one measurement I've heard people use, as well as fleet size. And Boyd, you've alluded to that already, and I think that's a very valid point with the capital expense of those trucks. Take a hard look at it. So, Boyd, anything else you want to add?
No, I think you covered it. Great job.
Great, thank you. Ted, back to you for Q&A.
Yes, and well done, guys. We got a lot of questions. Some are company specific, so at the end of this, Roger, I will pass it on to you guys to answer. But before I get into this, I wanted to, I forgot to thank our members, Pennsylvania Petroleum members, for getting on this. And there is also ads clients across the country. So some of these questions are very, are specific to ads, and some of them are more so general. So first one we got in, we don't have any tank monitors in the field today. Where do we start?
Well, I think that's, we sort of covered that, if you will, from the sense that you got to pick a tank monitor vendor that matches your particular needs. There are, by the way, some tank monitor vendors that only do propane. Well, if you're a propane and fuel oil and you want to deploy monitors in both environments, then certainly keep that in mind as you choose that vendor. And the connectivity methods, I think, are a big part of that as well as what alerts, what website capability, what mobile app capabilities come into play.
Okay, very good.
I would add to that look at your deployment, do the deployment analysis. Take a look at your delivery history, look at the number of stops that you're actually making to that customer based on their annual usage and tank size, and what optimum would be. So if you're averaging 36% fill in the tank, and you want to average 50 or 55% of the tank, those are the customers that you want to focus telemetry on. So once you do the analysis, now you know what problem it is we're trying to solve. Do I have 300 customers that could benefit, or that my company could benefit from, or is it 100? And instead of guessing and just kind of putting them out here and there, I would always start with the deployment analysis.
And I'll just throw in, Boyd, in my 35 years of ad systems, and again, having been a former dispatcher, looking at delivery efficiency has always been a topic I've always been interested in. I'll just blanketly throw everybody under the bus and say I think everyone could benefit from some improvement, and tank monitors being one of the components that helps with that overall efficiency.
I agree.
Very good. Moving on here, we deliver both propane and heating oil. Are we better off having tank monitors on one product over the other?
I think as a general guideline, no, I wouldn't be product specific necessarily, but part of your analysis could be, where's the scarce resource? In other words, if I have generously sized fleet for fuel oil trucks, but I only have one propane truck because I'm just getting into that business, well, that's a scarce resource. And to have that one truck driving many miles to make small deliveries is going to get you in a pickle real fast. So, part of that analysis for me would be, where's the limited resource, or where's the over capacity? And certainly, as Boyd mentioned, analysis looking at average drops, where is the part of my business that could benefit most by throwing some technology at it and increasing my efficiency. So no difference in my mind between fuel oil and propane. Both have great value. But I think the analysis has to go deeper to decide if you're going to pick and choose which way you go, have a decision as to why you've chosen that particular path to go down.
Do the deployment analysis on both segments and make your decision based on payback and return on investment. You can't go wrong.
Agreed.
Very good. This is more of an ad specific question, but is there a problem if we have multiple brands of tank monitors and we want to connect them via Ad Smart Connect?
All right, so just for those that are not Ad Systems customers, Smart Connect is the product that is the APIs that allow the tank monitor vendor to take those readings and submit them directly into the E3 Ad Systems database. I'm sure other back office vendors offer integrations as well. But from a Smart Connect standpoint, from an Ad System standpoint, no difference to us who is supplying the data to us. So if you had multiple tank monitor vendors, maybe you had one that you've been happy with for years and now you're going to try something new, or maybe the previous vendors phasing out their tank monitor business completely, is fine. Having a blended tank monitor vendor scenario does not affect how we update the back office system at all.
Very good. Moving on here. All right. You may have covered this, but do you know when the tank monitor is not working versus when there just isn't any usage at the home?
Boyd, why don't you run with that one?
Yeah, I think I know I can speak for WestRock, and I'm fairly confident most telemetry companies are doing the same. But along with your daily reporting, however you're accessing the information, the portal, the app, or emails or text messaging, there's reporting on issues. Squirrel chews through the cable, the sensor gets knocked off, landscapers cuts whatever the case may be on your daily reporting with where your inventory levels are and all the other alerts that can be configured in most tank monitors, from decompression to draw rate, etc. They're reporting as well. Battery health, cell signal strength, satellite communications, all the other things that are necessary for the monitor to work properly.
Very good. Is there an ideal percentage of tanks you should have that should have tank monitors?
Well, great. So from Roger's seat, my standpoint would be, hey, put them on every tank. Of course, there's an ROI that's in play, and you got to decide where that cutover point would be. I embrace the technology. I think it's a really good thing, and certainly, again, I alluded to the fact that I was a dispatcher many years ago, before there was an internet, before there was a cell phone technologies. tank monitors would have helped me tremendously on a great deal of the problem accounts we had. So, Boyd, is there a guideline you use typically in your analysis?
I do the deployment analysis. I would determine those locations that achieve the fastest payback and the highest ROI that meet my financial investment objectives, and that's the appropriate number.
Is it common, Boyd, to say, I'll put you on the spot, is it common to say, 10% of my customer base or 50% of my customer base, or is it more like 1/2 of 1% of my customer base?
Well, I don't know that there's a hard and fast rule, but I would say, probably 80% of your problems or your inefficient locations are 20% of your locations. So the old 80-20 rule would probably prevail. But again, my financial objectives, I may only have a certain amount that I can invest. And so by using the deployment analysis to tell me where my highest ROI, then I can basically come down to the level of whatever I have available to invest. And then as my business grows and my efficiency improves and my bottom line improves, because that's what it's about. It's improving per delivery profitability, per customer profitability, and your company's profitability. And that's where we focus. That's our wheelhouse.
Makes sense.
Very good. So we've had a couple questions. I'm going to just try to wrap into one here. From a marketing perspective, how successful have companies been passing some of the costs along to customers? And just to kind of tie in the other question, so there's obviously the efficiency side of tank monitors and the long-term ROI, but what are some of the initial rollout strategies to avoid some of the upfront costs?
Boyd, why don't you run with that one?
Well, on the latter part of the question, there's lots of companies out there that like WestRock that provide a leasing option, so there's really no cash outlay up front. I think that helps defer some of the cost of it. I'm sorry, what was the first part of the question?
From a marketing perspective, how successful has companies been passing along some of the costs to consumers?
It's spotty all around across the country. I know in the Northeast, it's very prevalent where the customer contributes either an installation charge to get the unit installed or a monthly fee. Some charge a monthly fee to their customers for access to the information. More affluent areas where we monitor multiple systems from burner lockout to CO2, water, propane, spa, pool, et cetera, temperature. Those customers are typically paying a monthly fee to the marketer. But generally, so that's two strategies, right? So if the customer is willing to pay for it or contribute something to it, I can market and sell into that. And so that dictates where the monitor goes. On the other hand, it's primarily for the benefit of reducing the number of stops, increasing the average delivery size and average profit per delivery, then it's probably more of an investment, a capital investment that I'm making.
Very good.
Very good.
Do you just monitor tank levels, or do you also monitor home temperature, smoke, etc.?
Yes, we monitor generators, whether they're running, not running, exercising, like I said, burner lockout, temperature. We can do homes, we can do pools, we do spas. We got a 420 milliamp connection. We got an RS-232 connection. We do alarm monitoring on cylinder cages, obviously any kind of tank, refined product tanks, verticals of 65. And there's lots of companies out there, in all fairness, that have a broad range of products that are capable of doing some or all of these things. And I think that's really the point Roger was making when you're looking to select. Once you've identified that, hey, I want to explore telemetry, I need to understand what the opportunity is in my business and what the impact and investment are. Now let's look at what's the right company to partner with, or maybe there's more than one company, depending on your specific need and your particular geographical operation. And, make sure that the business you select has a broad range of, it kind of starts with gauging, measuring, and sensing. That's kind of the first leg of the four-legged stool. Then you get into communicating, multiple strategies for getting that data moved from the tank back to the next step of the process, which generally is accessing and reporting on the information, how and when and where you want that data. and then finally the sales and design, engineering, and customer support after the install is done.
Very good. Next question. Can the reading intervals be changed easily by the fuel supplier, for example, increasing the frequency during cold weather and decreasing the frequency during the summer?
The click of a mouse. Click of a mouse. If you got certain counts you want to increase the frequency, it's just go into the host and make the change. Or if you want to do a broad range, I can only speak for us, but we can do a macro change for you just as easily.
Very good. This is from the section Roger was talking about pulling tickets. This may or may not have been answered, but if you can just elaborate, that would be great. How is it suggested to pull tank monitor customers different from other customers when selecting the ticket?
All right, so from an ad systems back office standpoint, two strategies I've seen in use. One is we have a field on each tank called the tank category code. That's one strategy I've seen people use to identify those tanks that have a tank monitor on them. And the other strategy I've seen is to set up a parallel degree day table. So I have my degree day table, and I have multiple degree day tables, but I have a degree day table for my regular accounts, and I might set up a parallel one with the same degree day values every day, but put all my tank monitor companies in that parallel degree day table 2, for instance. And when I'm pulling tickets, I get to decide if I want to pull for all degree day tables or just degree day table 1 so I can pull ahead. Or no, I want to pull my tank monitor guys now and they're in degree day table number 2, so I can do my ticket pull differently for that different degree day table. So those are the two strategies I've seen in our customer base.
Very good. Next question. Please address / discuss LP gauge inaccuracy and calibration.
Well, it depends on the type of gauge, whether it's you're talking about the R3 gauges on customer tanks or large bulk storage tanks, propane truck tanks, 4-inch, 8-inch styles. But look, the older the tank, the longer the float arm, the float support arm, there's probably a little more variation in accuracy in those, like on a 30 or an 18 that's been out in the field for a very long time. They tend to, over time, sag a little bit so that it distorts a little bit of the measurement. But I would say generally they're 2 to 5% within the accurate range. Some more accurate than others. But it's the reading that you're going to get transmitted back to your host and that you're going to be utilizing for building your routes is going to be as accurate as the tank gauge itself is.
Very good. We got a good amount of ad specific questions. So if you sent that to me, I'm going to pass this along to Roger and the rest of the team at ads after the call for them to follow up with you on. One more question that I think we're going to wrap up after this, but Boyd, I think you were kind of getting into specifically with West Rock, some of your financing options and ways to launch or roll out and lower some of the initial costs. Could you and Roger further discuss, just from an overall industry market standpoint, what are some of the common ranges or options available to someone that's looking to adopt or introduce tank monitors within their company?
Well, if you're talking about the acquisition of the equipment itself, there's a couple of different ways. One, obviously, you can, just outright purchase, and based on the number of units that you're looking to deploy, hopefully it's backed up by your analysis on where you're going to get the biggest bang for your buck. Then so there's the outright purchase. We have a couple of customers we've done a forever lease on. They don't ever want to own the equipment, and we're happy to do that. But it's very rare. But we also have, and I think most do, a leasing option for 36 or 60 months, 3 years or 5-year leases, where at the end of the lease, then you own the equipment, and it enables the company to get into monitoring for dollars per monitor per month, as opposed to depending on the size of deployment, could be hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of dollars invested up front. So it gives them the flexibility. And, frankly, a lot of the companies that we deal with on the refined product side that are just, stepping into the propane, it helps offset. In fact, I had a customer yesterday that just started that is doing the very thing. They're outlaying hundreds of thousands of dollars for tanks and trucks and equipment, and they want to use WestRock, and so the leasing option for them was a perfect solution.
Very good. Like I said, I think we're gonna wrap up with that. For anyone that did ask a question that wasn't answered, I will certainly pass this along to Roger and Boyd, and they will. I'm sure they will connect with you offline. Other than that, I appreciate everyone's time. Thank you for getting on this. Roger, Boyd, anything else on your end before we wrap up here?
Just from my end, Ted, again, thank you very much to you, Ted, and the PPA for pulling this together. And thank you for everyone who's attended this session. Hopefully you got some good information out of it. And Boyd, certainly a special thank you to you for being my wingman as well.
Thanks, everyone. I appreciate the opportunity. And if I can be of assistance, don't hesitate to reach out.
Very good. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, Ted.
Thank you.
Bye.